Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm your host, Liz Hyman, bringing the rescue boat to your sales challenges. In this ever-changing sales environment, it's easy for leaders to feel adrift. We're here to be the beacon guiding you to success. Each episode, I'm joined by top sales experts and practitioners who have navigated this waters and come out victorious. Together, we'll uncover the insights and strategies that will help you hit your sales targets and grow your business. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. This is Sales SOS podcast, and we're talking about using AI in sales. And this is our second podcast about using AI in sales. And we're going to talk now about specific tools that you can use in sales, again, to really improve your game. How do I bring my team up to another level using AI tools? Or how do I bring my personal game up using AI tools? So let's jump in. And does somebody want to start this conversation? Bryn, start us out.
Okay, I'm obsessed with a Chrome extension called getmagical.com. It does a lot of things, but it's a short code extension, meaning that we can add lots and lots of content, and with a quick couple strokes of the keyboard, it will automatically bring that content up. I am using this for my prompts. So when I have a really good prompt, I'm storing that inside of it's Magical or getmagical.com, and it has placeholders. So what that means is I can have a placeholder that says job title, or a placeholder that says paste transcript here, or all those questions that Renee would happen to be asking. You can actually use that as a placeholder where now you have your short keystrokes, and we're using the little tilde key because no one uses it for anything. So that's what we're using. And then so you might have the little tilde Q for whatever you're calling this prompt. And when it comes up in Magical, you see it's on top of ChatGPT or Bard or whatever you're using. And so it shows up, and then it lets you fill in the blanks. And then when you hit enter, all those blanks are filled in that prompt. All you do is hit enter and you get it. So we hired an intern to create a prompt in one short code that from a transcript creates a blog. It creates 10 quotes from that transcript that you can use in Canva or anywhere else. It creates 4 areas of the script for you to cut the video. So it'll tell you where to cut the video and there's an ebook and a checklist. So one prompt with one transcript now will give you, I think it's 20 pieces of content.
Wow.
So if you think you're going to stand out in the content game by creating more of it, I don't think that's a good strategy anymore. And I'm not arguing with you, Bryn. I'm talking about anybody out there who, you've got that covered. That's 20 pieces of comment or 20 pieces of content from a single prompt. And we've got the repurposing game down. And so what does that tell you from a content standpoint? It had better be good. It had better be differentiated. Right. You had better get it right. You'd better touch some emotional nerve in your listeners, your viewers, your readers, whoever that is, because you're not going to be able to swarm the internet with your content and be ubiquitous anymore, because everybody can be ubiquitous with literally apparently a tilde Q is all it takes to be ubiquitous on the internet now with your content.
Well, I'm gonna push back a little bit because this is based on a transcript, right? So this is not asking AI to go find the content. This is saying, right? So for us, we interview the client and we pull out the magic, right?
I know I'm with you on that. So you're creating it, but now you're magnifying it and putting it everywhere. And so what is happening is that the bar to clear for distribution has just been lowered. You can step over it now. Okay. Yes. Which means that you can't put mediocre content everywhere and believe that you are going to succeed. Now The distribution part used to be a lever. It's no longer a lever. The bar has been lowered. You better have good content, which means you better have something good to say, which means it better be provocative, and you'd better start, get people. You'd better use it to get people to start thinking rather than just getting people to start clicking.
So I think that this is really important, though, because people think I'm going to use AI to create my content, and you guys are both really clear that's not going to cut it.
Can I just say there are 5 elements that have to go into that content in order for it to convert to conversations. The first one is it immediately has to resonate with your buyer. If your content does not resonate with them, even from the title of it, they're gone, right? Like if they're scrolling and they see their title, you have a much higher shot that they'll stop. Number 2, it has to create curiosity. They have to want to lean in. And so if you can't get it, curiosity immediately, they're gone. Number 3, it needs to teach them something new they didn't know before. If it sounds like everything else, they don't care. Number 4, what they just learned needs to get them thinking differently about the way they're doing things today. They may have learned that like elephants come in 17 colors, but if that doesn't affect their business, just learning something new doesn't matter, right? So what they've learned needs to get them thinking differently about their current solution situation. And number 5, it needs to create a compelling moment. We cannot start a conversation with a lurker. They have to be engaging. So there has to be some compelling moment that gets them to comment or react or check out our profile or ask us to connect or accept our connection request, or follow us if it's on Twitter, or whatever that is. We need to move them from, I just consumed your content, to you're worth me reacting and doing something. So now I've come out of the woodwork and you know who I am. And if we can't do those things, to Jeff's point, that content will not land.
So I want to move us from, content, this is one area we can be using, and there's some really great tools. And Renee, I'm going to jump to you now, but go ahead, Mike. I'll jump to Renee in a second. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to give it a tool. So
give us a tool. Okay.
So 2 tools that I'm using today. One of them is CapShow, and I'm working on getting away from it with that GPT that I shared, just because it's a little bit more than what we need for the period that we're working through. And what it helps us do is take audio content, convert it into podcast show notes, and then convert that into social media posts, whether they're LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter or what have you. That's one really cool tool. The tool that I'm super excited about, though, is Opus Clips. Opus Clips, I think, could be used across the board, and they continue to keep adding new functionality there. But imagine as a sales rep that you're sending a short video to your prospect and want to stand out by adding stylized captions into that video. That's what Opus Clips can help you do, and do it immediately. And the problem that it solves for me, the job that it specifically does, is that stylized caption capability. So Opus Clips and CapShow are 2 tools that are available, and they're Opus Clip is well worth its weight in gold. CapShow, it depends on what you're trying to do with it.
And that's opus.pro if anyone's looking. I think that's opus.pro.
Thank you.
So I want to jump to Renee for a minute. Renee, how much have you played with AI inside HubSpot? Have you done any lead scoring or any of that yet?
Well, lead scoring, HubSpot's lead scoring is kind of like there's a manual algorithm to it. You give points, you take points away. Like you have a lot of that. I wanted to touch a little bit on, I have a lot of tools. HubSpot's coming out with a lot of their AI that they have implemented right now is around content, right? Because no one right answer, right? And lower risk, right? And so communication, helping people communicate, it's a great tool for that, and content falls into that. There are a couple things that I'll just take the same conversation a little bit higher level with some specific tools. There are a couple things that are really important. We just talked about experimenting. We talked about how unique AI is for everybody, right? Like we all come at it a different way. We talked about like how it reflects on what we put in is some of what we're going to get out. You run some brand risk with that, with all this experimentation, with all this uniqueness and this amplifying unique individuals. And so you start running the risk of sounding rather schizophrenic to an audience en masse, right? Like think of a customer journey. They come in, they see marketing, they hear one voice, they go to sales, they hear another voice, they go to customer success, they hear another voice, they get some product marketing, or release notes or things like that. It's all a different voice because everybody's using this individually. And a lot of people have said, okay, sure, I'll reimburse for your plan, or it's okay for you to pay for your plan. I'm going to make a case that it's time now to start putting some process around that. And you need to be thinking about the company tone and voice. And there are some tools that help with that. So Grammarly, Bren mentioned the Chrome extensions. Grammarly is like my security blanket, like the little kid in Peanuts that doesn't go anywhere without the blanket. I don't go anywhere without Grammarly except my mobile because I don't like their keyboard, the Grammarly keyboard on iOS. But other than that, I have the Grammarly extension. So everywhere I type, and this all started in 2018 or 2019 because I got tired of my CEO finding errors in things that I took him. And I was like embarrassed. And I was like, that's it. So I think it was 2018. So like since that time, I've had Grammarly as my security blanket. Grammarly has a team plan. And you can do this inside of ChatGPT. There are other tools that you can do too. So if you have a team plan with ChatGPT, which I think only requires 2 or 3 people, we aren't talking about a huge investment, you can then do custom instructions for the team, right? And inside of Grammarly, you can set a tone and voice so that anybody who's using Grammarly and that Chrome extension to kind of cover their back on some decent grammar and spelling errors. Because let's face it, with autocorrect and things like that, we're moving fast. We expect the technology to keep up. Grammarly just does a better job. It's going to help you take out some of those filler words. Like it's going to do more than just commas and periods, right? And spelling. When you do that, those custom instructions for your brand, where you get everybody to kind of like, we don't use this word. I mean, how many times have you said in a sales with your sales teams, we don't use these words, we use these words, right? Like those kinds of things, you can kind of put that in so that the AI knows that ahead of time, so that you're kind of putting some guardrails and some personality to keep that less schizophrenic thing from happening. So you can do that in Canva with like Canva creations. You can do it with Grammarly. You can do it inside of a team plan. So it's really, I think, because we're talking with leadership teams with this podcast, I think that's an important thing to kind of elevate. And that gets you some consistency across the group too, right? So those are a couple tools and ways to use it. There are also other ones that I think are really important in a niche, like video editing. Descript is like dark magic. I mean, that you can edit based on cutting a word out of a transcript. I mean, there's some really great tools, but I think one of the most important things that I'm seeing right now, and I'll just kind of, almost everybody in this group has talked about ChatGPT and DALL-E, and right, like here's another big risk you run with that. They all sound the same. There's a personality, if you will. I hate to use the word personality, but it's the best placeholder I can use for every AI, right? And the reason you're all thinking there's a tell is because there's a huge number of people using OpenAI, right? You get a totally different flavor when you go, I'm trying not to use personality to amorphize it, but when you go to Claude and you use Anthropic, and when you go to Google and you use Gemini, or when you use other niche tools, you're going to get something a little bit more unique. And there's also some risk in being all in on one of these, that they go down, right? So if this is really critical to you, having some other, so just bringing those things higher level and thinking, just like you do with any other part of your business, how does that AI kind of work with? So any of these tools, how do they work together with the other things?
Great.
Yeah, I love that. Everything I put in there in an ever-changing world, right? Like every
well, and like a lot of people don't know DALL-E is coded to give a certain look and feel. Don't use DALL-E for images. It's like tired already. Like you can use it for the same way that you talked about with inspiring for logos and things like that. But if you're using it for every single image, it just has the feeling of DALL-E on purpose at the moment.
Salvador Dali.
Yeah, go to Midjourney. Use Canva, like use some other places, right?
Let's jump to some other tools, because I think these are the ones that people are thinking most about, like generically. When I say AI, people think ChatGPT, right? Or they start thinking about, I don't think about Grammarly, but I use it every day. what are some of the other tools in the sales arena that we should be thinking about that are leveraging AI?
There's one out there that scares me.
Go ahead, guys.
The one that's out there that scares me are some of these coaching tools that are connected to other companies that might be interested in sponsoring this podcast, which include Gong, Chorus, and a number of other ones in the space. But when you look at some of these in the background and what they're coaching on crap behavior. Which
it's aggregated mediocrity.
Yeah, and it's ridiculous. Like we've just seen instances where I had one reach out to me. They wanted me to help promote their stuff in one of those like influencer kind of things. And I said, I'm really not an influencer, but let me take a look at it. When I took a look at it, what they were promoting as positive coaching was coaching really crap behavior. And you could see it in the context of the type of call that they were coaching on. Needless to say, they came back and said, hey, thanks for the feedback, and never came back to me.
No thanks.
Promoting them.
But I think it's really important because I have a lot of qualms about the way that people use Gong, right? So never tell a salesperson what they have to say in what moment, because you're sure to get a salesperson tripping over their tongue and the person on the other end feeling like they're being manipulated, right? So we never want that. But I think there are things about Gong and Chorus AI that maybe are valuable. So if you were going to use it, how would you use a tool like that?
Yeah, I think
when sorry, Mike.
Go, Chris.
No, go ahead, Chris. Yeah,
I think when you look at that, like some of the coaching pieces are fine, knowing that the recording is there. They're looking for certain phrases that you're wrapping up in particular calls, making sure you cover all the key points. All that stuff's helpful. For me, at least the way I have traditionally operated, it would not work in real time to sit there and give me that prompt. I'm going to get distracted by what I'm trying to say because something got hit to me on the screen that, oh, hey, don't forget to do this. And I'm going to be like, that takes me completely out of the flow of where I was at. And maybe it's my ADD or something like that to where I would link onto that and it would mess me up. But I think it creates an unnatural flow. What I think you should look at is, what are the behaviors that I'm looking for? How is it that I can then coach that seller to the right behaviors, not expect a tool to do that coaching for me? That's where when we start talking about AI replacing salespeople and sales leaders, I'm like, if you're trying to remove the conversations, then maybe you're right. But if you're interested in having the conversations with your team, if you're interested in having conversations with your customers and prospects, then AI is not going to replicate that because, frankly, the human brain's just too complex and we're all very different, right? So that's where I would go with that. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah. You want to jump in?
Yeah, I do. Thanks for picking up on my verbal cues, my nonverbal cues, rather. And John, I'm curious, as our tech guru, what you think about this. And I think it goes back to, Chris, what you mentioned and what you referred to is the idea that this is an intern. So if it's an intern, now you're training an intern to train your salespeople. And I don't mind training someone to do the training. I'm not suggesting that's an extra step because it's infinitely scalable and repeatable. But what are these things trained on out of the box? They're trained on the massive amount of mediocre behavior that's out there that is only watering down what we do as people. And it's certainly not going to highlight the nuance of what you want your sellers to be, homing in on. And I've had a bunch of clients that are like, hey, look at this. Use this tool. It's got AI. I'm like, yeah, what do you want me to do with it? I think, I don't know, but it's got AI. I mean, that's what we're doing, right? I mean, it's got AI. Go do it. It's like, you don't even know what you're asking it to do. We're not starting with the end and working backward. You're taking a cool buzzword tool, paying a bunch of money for it, committing to a long-term deal because you get a better price. And then you're saying, well, we made this investment. You better use it. That is just the wrong way to go about progress. You're not reverse engineering success. You're taking a risk on something that is unproven and largely poor, but it's really cool. And it's just a bad way to go about making decisions.
Stop you guys a second, because I really want to dig into all the pitfalls and the dangers and the things we need to be thinking about in our next segment. What I want to do now is redirect you back to what are the tools that are out there that people could be using? Go ahead, Brent, jump in.
I just have to say this quote. I think Jill Rowley said, "A fool with a tool is still a fool."
Yeah. And my friend, I can't think of Chris's last name, who says you're just going to amplify suck.
Yeah. I always say a tool lets you do dumb things faster, right?
But that in mind, let's talk about some of the tools that are out there, because there's some really cool things. So there are predictive tools, and there are lead scoring tools, right? There are tools that can dig through the data. Gong can dig through the data and go, hey, we've noticed that when sales reps say this, the conversation sort of goes south. What do we need to learn about that? So let's kind of think about what are the things that are out there? What are the tools we could be using? And what could they do to up our game? What can they do to up our game around sales messaging specifically? Like, we could use ChatGPT, but can't we use Copilot in Salesforce to do some of those same things? And have you guys done any of this? Yeah, Brie, go ahead.
Well, so the one thing, I mean, this is to lead to messaging, and Sales Navigator has a new element called Account IQ, which actually will bring in industry statistics, company statistics. It's pulling it from the web. And then with one click, you have a summary of everything you need as a salesperson to start a conversation. You can now take that summary and stick it into an AI tool and say, hey, how can I use some of these insights to start a meaningful conversation? So a combination of this one-click summary, and whether you're using Bard or Gemini or whatever you decide to use, it's nice that it's like a one-click summary of everything I need about what's going on in the industry, what's going on in this company. It'll say if there, is there a decline in employees or a growth, right? So you get a lot of information in one click. So that, I think there's an AI element to that, but I think in combination with messaging tools, it could be incredibly powerful. That's all.
What else have you guys played with besides ChatGPT and sort of these generic ones? You guys have played with Gong a little bit and sort of seen the goods and the bads of it. What else have you played with? Have any of you played with anything that's doing, predictive lead scoring?
I think one tool that I thought was pretty interesting. I don't use it myself, but some of my marketing customers use it, which is a tool called Synthesia.ai or Synthesia.io or something. Basically what it does is that given any text that you have, you can turn it into a video with an AI avatar talking over it.
Oh yeah.
And what was interesting about that is, again, it's kind of a modern problem which people just don't read today. So you spend all this time doing like a 20 slide deck or something like that, or a long white paper or something like that. People just aren't gonna read that. And so if you want to turn that into something that is more consumable friendly, which is a video with a voiceover, that could be something that you could potentially use. I generally try to, I've learned that, if at any time you're sending out like a deck of any kind, you should at least give them the option where it's got a voiceover, because that's probably going to be consumed a little bit better. Now, I will say, again, going back to Bill's comment of like, you probably don't want to do this forever, because to Renee's point, it's all going to sound the same eventually. So you want to have an actual person kind of talk through that. But in the interim, as a stopgap solution, that's pretty good.
So I actually saw a tool like what you're talking about. And what they did was they created an avatar of you. So, and then they take all of your content and they mush it in whatever you do with data. You don't mush it, but you put it all together into a river or a pond or a brook or whatever they call it, a lake, I guess, right? You put it into a lake, and then when somebody asks a question, the AI finds the answer in all of that content that you've created, and it's an avatar that looks like you giving the answer. Have you guys seen that?
That's very cool, though.
I wish I could remember who the who the maker was of that, because they could sponsor this discussion too.
I'm not seeing that
Well
exact
played,
same
Liz.
thing, but I'm not seeing that exact thing, but they had a thing on 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago where they had all of these people who had given basically speeches and came in for interviews and had all this, but then you could interact with them, ask them specific questions, and it would find that part in the interview with that person, and they would respond. And I thought that was very similar sort of mechanism, but it was really, really interesting. So it's like you're having a conversation with this person who sometimes in certain cases that person's not around anymore. So
Yeah.
There's one other tool, Liz, that nobody's really brought up, and it's super obvious and probably the most common case, but there's still a lot of people not using it. So I think it's worth mentioning is transcription tools. So meeting transcription tools, I've been a long time. I think I've been with Otter for about 3 years. So I'm still a big fan of Otter, partially because of how many minutes is in the plan. And I think that matters. And especially with someone like Brent or I, who like put a lot of things in, more than just the meetings we are in ourselves, we would be putting into that transcription. But there are a lot of people like Fathom instead of Zoom. I've put some clients on that because it was free. There's a free ramp into that, a freemium sort of thing. So having transcriptions of calls, I find allows you to focus a lot more on the call, right? I still take notes. I've been taking some notes while we're all talking, but that's like my cheat sheet to go back into any kind of transcription. So I think that's one that's like still needs to be adopted more. Yeah. And I will say it also leads to unique things we can talk about in the next episode of bots showing up to meetings.
Yeah, that is a funny story. Wait, so I use a program called Read AI Meeting Notes. And it does a couple of things. One is it takes a transcription. Two is it takes the video and cuts it up into small pieces so you can watch an individual part. The other thing is it pulls highlights. Now, it's not very good at this yet, and says, these are the things that people committed to do. So if you were doing sales meetings and using that, as long as the other person was okay with you recording, then you can, cut things that they said right into your CRM, take the notes and put them right into your CRM, but it also gives you next action items. So you can take those and put them right into the CRM. Now, what will be brilliant is when it starts doing that for you. But yeah, go ahead, Brent.
Agents are coming.
Mine does. So I have Sybil.ai. Yep. It's expensive and it's phenomenal. If you say, okay, next step, it grabs it. So you need to know when you're having that conversation, you say, okay, the next step for that is the next step, and it knows. So I have been trained to use it, but it recaps it in an email. Now, I love this, and I love, John, I want to hear the name of that video that you program that you talked about, because I would take my next step email and put that into a video and send that with the verbiage, right? And so we've got a whole bunch of things going. But although it's a little more money than everything else, I think Sybil AI is amazing. It's also, so we have 4 people on it as a team, and I can make calls available. I can listen to my team's calls when they have prospecting calls. And this is my favorite part from this perspective. It marks when someone nods and when someone smiles.
Wow.
So I can say, you closed this 10 minutes before you knew you closed it. Right. Right. And so it's a great tool like that. Anyway, I will move on, but I can't say enough, Sybil AI.
So we're running out of time here on this conversation. I want to add just a couple of things to think about. So there are AI tools that are doing a lot of really cool things for sales. And we all, just to show how new this is, a lot of us are just learning to use them too. So like I said, there's lead scoring and prioritization. HubSpot, Apollo, Pardo, Salesforce have these components in them as we learn to use them. Forecasting, HubSpot does some, Salesforce, H2O, AI Cloud, Neptune, like these are all that are going to help you take that data and turn it into forecasts. Personalized outreach and messaging. HubSpot is doing some of this now. HubSpot is really owning this AI space. They're really trying to figure out where to put it. And learning to use it all is, I think, overwhelming.
Liz, can I add one thing? Like if you, Dharma Shah, who's the technical co-founder of HubSpot, talks about a lot of this journey and what they're doing and what he's tinkering with on LinkedIn in particular. So you might want to follow him if you're interested in what HubSpot's doing, because he kind of talks through the whys.
I love it.
Yeah. So, these are things to watch as we're using our CRMs. There are already tools like ChatSpot and Exceed. I haven't used either of those, but I've talked to other people who are working on these. If this is what's happened so far in this opportunity, your next step might be this, right? So sort of looking for, hey, if this one's stuck, maybe try this. So looking for trends in our CRMs, in our conversations, that will help us look at next steps. But I think there's one really critical piece to all of this. As we're using these larger tools, as we're using them for prediction, as we're using them for forecasting or for telling us what to do next, if people aren't using the CRM and putting the information in, it is just pulling arbitrary nonsense, and it won't be accurate. It won't be useful. So we have to really use it. It's still data in, garbage in, garbage out. That hasn't changed. So the more accurately we use our CRMs, the more accurately these other tools are going to start working. Any other kind of, Bill, you've been really quiet. Any other final words about what tools we could be using?
Yeah, I'll put a tag at the end. All these tools are great. I've not used many of them. I've messed around with Sidebeam a little bit for presentations. And of course, ChatGPT and so on. Here's what AI doesn't do. Questions from the client in real time. So just be careful about how much you send out that you think is going to be self-explanatory, and you don't have to know it and internalize it, because when Q&A comes, I'm in a professional speakers group too, and everybody in the beginning was all freaked out about, what happens when AI can replace what I'm going to talk about? I don't know, but I can tell you this: when Q&A comes and people want to follow up, we'll see how much, AI could be your enemy at that point, because I don't know, I haven't, but I can tell you in 10 minutes if I can. No, we want to know right now. Like, what do you know? So just be careful about over-dependency. Still kind of falls on.
That kind of reminds me of what Renee started to talk about, which is, as we begin to rely on these note takers. Renee, was it you that showed up in the meeting and there were only note takers?
Yeah. So I showed up in a meeting with a client, and we got there, and it was where prospects can interact and ask questions. And the note taker, it follows these AI agents, right? And the next step beyond chat is agents, AI taking action for you, right? This agent that will go do a step for you. That's what the next thing. So these agents are really good. You've integrated them. They're in your calendar. They're in your Zoom. You've told it to be there. It doesn't matter that you had a flat tire or running late from your last call or whatever. It shows up, right? And so the note takers show up when people don't, right? And sometimes it's by design, because we have an internal meeting and we know we can't be there, and this is how we're going to be up to speed. And sometimes we forget with an external meeting, and we decided, well, we have multiple note takers that showed up, even though the people don't. They're still prospects. They still get the email synopsis. I mean, we're here. So we just kind of turned it into like an interview with the COO so that I could, use it for the marketing content, but also because we knew that the sale, like, we got to do whatever we wanted if they're note takers. But this is like a new protocol and a new etiquette that will come along, because as we get more into the agent world, like, we're going to have to think about what happens when the AI takes actions without us being present.
And that's a wrap of this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope today's episode has equipped you to navigate the sales seas with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to the Sales SOS podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday, or share your questions on YouTube or LinkedIn. Until next time, keep sailing towards those sales goals. I'm Liz Hyman, your captain here at the Sales SOS podcast, saying smooth sailing and successful selling.